With Donald Trump back in the White House, what's next for China-U.S. relations? On January the 20th, Trump was sworn in as the 47th President of the United States, declaring that the golden age of America begins right now. Zheng, Chinese President Xi Jinping's special representative and Vice President of China, attended the inauguration ceremony, marking the first time a senior Chinese official has participated in the U.S. presidential inauguration. Just days before the big event, Chinese President Xi Jinping spoke with Trump on the phone at the latter's request, and according to the official news agency Xinhua, both leaders expressed the hope that ties will get off to a good start in Trump's new term. How will the world's two largest economies handle their relationship, especially given that Trump's pick for Secretary of State is currently on China's sanctions list? How will this impact the rest of the world, particularly the global south? Welcome to a special edition of The Point with me, Li Xin, coming to you live from Beijing. I'm pleased to be joined from Washington, D.C. by Peter Kuznick, history professor and director of Nuclear Studies Institute at American University. From New York City by Margaret Kimberley, executive editor with Black Agenda Report. From Shanghai by Professor Zheng, director of the Institute of the U.S. and Pacific Studies at Shanghai International Studies University, and here in the studio by Aina Tangen, senior fellow at Taihe Institute. The warmest welcome to all of you. We have a lot to cover, so let's get straight down to business. First, I want to talk about how Trump and his cabinet is viewing China at this stage. Now, President Trump announced Tuesday, his first full day in office, that up to $500 billion in private sector investment to build artificial intelligence infrastructure in the United States. He said, what we want to do is we want to keep it in this country. Mr. Trump said, China is a competitor. Others are competitors. We want to be in this country and we're making it available. So I want to go to Peter first. How do you see Trump's definition of China, and how heated will the competition be?
We know that from Trump's first term, that he was very, very hostile to China. He saw China as America's great adversary. It was his national security report in 2018 that said America's security threats are no longer global terrorism. It's now China and Russia, and China is the pacing threat. And what did he do? He started a trade war against China. And during his campaign, he threatened 60% tariffs on all Chinese imports and 100% on Chinese electric vehicles. And then Trump pulls a reversal. And shortly before his inauguration, he starts to talk about China in friendly terms. And he wants to open up to China. Now, we know that Trump is very transactional. And he's got some people around him who are real China hawks, like Marco Rubio and Mike Walls. But he's got other people like Elon Musk who've got economic interests in China and want to have a stable and friendly relation with China. So we don't know with Donald Trump which way he's going to go.
All
He's giving signals now that he wants to have a more conciliatory and friendlier policy. When his statement in that discussion with Xi Jinping,
we'll get to that in just a moment, Peter. Yeah, sorry, we don't go into the details yet, but Professor Huang, I want to get the Chinese perspective here from what you picked up from the inauguration speech and from the Stargate ceremony signing that initiative for private investment in AGI. What is your take on the current definition of China in Trump's eye?
I think that we have to look at U.S.-China relationship from a bigger picture, from the perspective of the world, of the entire global situation. After all, U.S. and China, both nations are deeply integrated into this world. They live in the same world. From Donald Trump's inaugural speech, one can see a very clear imperialism approach towards outside, very aggressive. If the private a previous Biden administration still emphasized on the rule-based order, and Donald Trump doesn't want any rule anymore. He said, "I'm the rule. I want Panama. I want dominant in Gulf, American so-called American Gulf, and it's very, very pure and very naked imperialist speech. And in that regard, if we want to live in a peaceful and stable world, and Donald Trump administration is a direct threat to peace and stability in the entire world. So as a result, you cannot imagine U.S.-China relationship can be good if Donald Trump said, "I want what I want," just because I have such a capability. Where's the rules? Where's the norms? Where's the principles established? Without this, even though China opened its arms, said, "Look, we want cooperation. We want to work with the United States," facing such an aggressive United States, such a great power or hegemon who does not consider any rules in the international behaviors. How can China, from this perspective, manage a kind of stable relationship between United States? It's not just bilateral. It's Donald Trump's administration has already launched such an onslaught to the international order that we know. That's where I think the fundamental
Okay.
problem really is.
Yeah. Margaret, what's your take from your perspective?
Well, I would like to just follow up with what the professor just said. The U.S. is always imperialist, always. The U.S. wants what they call primacy. The U.S. does not want competitors. The U.S. Sees China as an enemy because it is technologically more advanced than the US. And there's always some scheme to put money into something so that the US stays ahead of China, in this case, AI or something. And it's always a futile effort. Always too late. China has already gotten ahead of the US, and this is something that US presidents cannot abide. They cannot, relations may be better or worse, but the US sees every country as a rival. The US even treats its friends badly. So we will see, yes, of course, there are China hawks in his administration because those are the only people who are on foreign policy teams of any president. They're anti-China, anti-Russia, pro-US hegemony. And I'm afraid that this will continue. There may be some modifications in behavior over time. And I have to say, things can't possibly be any worse than they were under President Biden, whose team had a terrible relationship with China, lying to President Xi, lying to his people. So whatever Trump does, I believe it can't be any worse than his predecessor.
Aina, do you agree or not? Because we have seen some more nuanced approach, at least. Of course, he called China a competitor, but he also, kind of reached out, sent out an olive branch by inviting a Chinese leader to attend his inauguration ceremony. He also called days before his inauguration to talk with Chinese President Xi Jinping. And on the first day of his, new term in the White House, he unexpectedly held off imposing tariffs on China, although we do not know whether that's going to follow over the next few days. Is he becoming more careful, more nuanced, more sophisticated when it comes to China?
Well, I'm afraid I couldn't agree with that statement. He's basically running what he's always done, which is this is the fifth season of the Washington edition of The Apprentice. You look at his cast of characters, he has 19 people from Fox News, or previously with Fox News. This is about a beauty contest, and he's going to assign them tasks. If they fail, they'll be fired. In terms of his nuanced view, no, he is not nuanced. He has one goal, which is to divide Russia from China. And that's why, in part, he's holding off. The other problem is the reality of putting 60% tariffs on China. He knows that the American people aren't very keen on having more inflation, given that 70% of the population believes they're living paycheck to paycheck. It would be disastrous for him to try to implement it. So he's juggling a couple of things, but it's not based on ideology. I agree with my fellow panelists. This is purely him trying to do real politic Unfortunately, it's the Kissinger doctrine, but it does not have an end game.
It does seem that he wants to send a message of wanting to work with China. However, for instance, after the call with his Chinese President Xi Jinping, President Trump posted on his Truth Social that the call was a very good one for both China and the USA. It's my expectation that we'll solve many problems together and starting immediately. He said in December already that China and the United States can together solve all the problems of the world and the conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East, for instance. China has been calling on, cooperation between China and the United States as two of the largest economies in the world. So how much credit, how much benefit of the doubt can we give to the Trump administration on the will to cooperate with each other? Peter, how do you read into these signals?
I think I give a little bit more benefit of the doubt than my colleagues on the panel. The Chinese view is win-win. The U.S. view is always zero-sum game, and Trump has always had the zero-sum game approach. But I think, as other people have said, he recognizes that his war policy toward China, his trade war policy, his hostility policy, is going to backfire, especially with his MAGA base, because it's going to cost them, it's going to be more expensive, more inflation, and he's got some other voices in this administration. They're not all neocons. Biden was surrounded by all neocons. Biden came to office with 18 top advisors from the Center for New American Security, the China hawks. Trump is a little more nuanced, I will give him credit for. Musk and some of the other business people have investments in China and don't want to see the trade wars with China and don't want to see military confrontation with China. As Xi Jinping has said, the red line is going to be Taiwan. And we'll see what Trump does about Taiwan.
Yeah.
He says about Taiwan that they should pay us protection money. So he's had that mafia approach so far to Taiwan. But what's going to happen is very hard to predict. I'm not as certain as everybody else that this is going to end up as badly as everybody seems to think.
Well, do the other panelists agree or not agree? I see Aina clearly shaking his head. Professor Huang is smiling. I don't know. Who's the strongest to voice a different opinion here?
Well, I completely disagree with Peter. I mean, I believe that you always have to enter into a relationship with good intentions. But based on past behavior and the way he thinks about things, Trump is not going to. He thinks he's playing a game. He believes he's smarter. Everything that you just said about how he has great hopes for China, he said the same thing about North Korea and how he was going to settle all that. If you go back, his rhetoric is always the same. He's assigning tasks to Musk, but the fact is it's an impossible task. You can't take $2 trillion out of a $6 trillion budget and expect government to work. Musk has kind of scaled back and gone to $1 trillion, but that's not even possible either. Already, one of the players, Vivek, has disappeared. He's off the panel, although he's apparently going to run for governor or something like that, but he was pushed out. So you're going to see this kind of Game of Thrones within the Trump administration as their assigned tasks fail and then try to divert blame. But in terms of his worldview, it is transactional, and he has a larger issue here, which, as I said, it's trying to split the world's largest resource country, Russia, from the world's largest manufacturer, China.
All right. Well, Professor Huang, if you want to add something here, you're welcome. But I do want to, try to combine this one as well, because as we know, Rubio was sanctioned twice by China in 2020 for his false accusations concerning Hong Kong and Xinjiang. So first of all, how will Trump's China policy be shaped by the mix of China hawks and relative China more friendlier people such as Elon Musk? And then how are we going to handle the Rubio issue?
First, Elon Musk is not friendly to China. He's friendly to his money, his interest. Personally, going back to the first question, I'm not going to extend any inch of trust to Donald Trump. Whoever trusts him will be taken. If China can learn any lesson from his first term, we know that he invited Prince Xi Jinping to his farm, and President Xi Jinping went. He came to China, gave him the best treatment that he deserved, he wants. And what happened? We say that fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I don't think China should be fooled again by this guy. Like the previous panelist said, he's playing a game. I don't think this person, I mean Donald Trump, deserves any benefit of doubt because he doesn't go by his words at all. You cannot trust him. Going to the Rubio, the sanctions, it is a problem. But I think not only China sanctions people like Rubio, United States also sanctions some Chinese, senior officials. I think on this part, just on pragmatic fashion, that China and the United States may exchange the lift of sanctions, not one person, but a group of them. China can lift the sanctions of senior officials of the United States on the list. And meanwhile, United States also simultaneously lift the sanctions on some Chinese senior officials. I think that's called diplomacy or called exchange. The point here is that if you deal with people like Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, the only way you deal with him is first you have to stand firm on your ground, and then you start to see if we can have a negotiation
All
and a
right.
bargaining. In other words, if you extend your hands to him, he's going to respond to you with a fist. You have to extend your fist first, and then let's see if we can have a chance to shake hands with each other.
How
I think
interesting.
that's the approach.
How interesting, because when asked about whether China will consider dropping the sanctions against Secretary of State Rubio, Guo Jiakun, spokesperson of China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, said China will firmly defend national interests. In the meantime, it is necessary for high-level Chinese and American officials to maintain contact in an appropriate way, period. Let's see how the two sides will handle this relationship. Yeah, Margaret, let's
Yes.
move on just a little bit because, there are a lot of unpredictability. That word is repeated by a lot of people already. But what about China's position? It seems that China has been repeating pretty much the same thing. For instance, last November when President Xi was talking to outgoing President Trump, he talked about four unchanged, China's goal of a healthy, sustainable relationship with the United States being one of them, for instance. And then during the phone call, just days before Trump's inauguration, President Xi said both he and Trump hope that bilateral ties will have a good start in the new U.S. presidential term and stand ready to push China-U.S. relations to make greater progress from a new starting point. But Chinese President Xi mentioned two issues, Taiwan and economic and trade relations. He stressed that confrontation and conflict should not be the choice of the two countries. What do you read of the messages?
Well, President Xi is repeating what his government has always said. Taiwan is the red line. And we have seen these foolish efforts by American presidents to try to use Taiwan, to treat it like, I always say Taiwan will end up like Ukraine if they're foolish enough to follow the U.S. Uh, I actually trust the Chinese government more than my own. The way the U.S. government works, it's one of hostility towards the whole world, and may be changes. I do recall as well when Trump invited Xi Jinping to his home, and his grandchild sang in Mandarin and so forth, and it all seemed very nice. Then he turns around, he asks the Canadians, who very foolishly arrested Meng Wanzhou of Huawei and created an international incident. Cutting off Huawei from the U.S., closing consulates, all kinds of very, very hostile behavior. So Trump is unpredictable as a person, but the U.S. is also unpredictable because the imperative is always to control. And so the U.S. cannot, I don't believe as it currently is, cannot have really good relations with any countries. Countries are either vassals or enemies. And as China won't be a vassal, inevitably, the U.S., I'm certain there will be a repeat of Trump administration policy, some continuation of Biden administration policy, towards China. The U.S. is not does not believe in a win-win anywhere in the world.
Well, Peter, I wonder what is your opinion there. It seems that the other three guests are very much skeptical of what's going to pan out over the next 4 years. Do you still believe that we should keep a little bit minimum level of optimism in this relationship and the U.S.'s relationship with other countries?
I have to believe that because the alternatives are too horrible to contemplate. You have to. The United States has been gearing up for war with China for several years now. You first had Admiral Davidson was saying that we have to be ready for war by 2027. Then you had General Minihan telling his people to be ready for war with China by 2025. And then you've recently, and you look at the kind of planning that's going on. July 20th of this year, David Sanger in the New York Times said the United States preparing to fight a three-front nuclear war against Russia, China, and North Korea simultaneously. The same day, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists had an article saying that top American planners believe we can fight and win a nuclear war.
That to me is all the reason to be more pessimistic about this relationship, Peter.
No, but I'm saying that if we don't make this work, the alternative is terrifying. You recently had this General Buchanan saying that if we fight a nuclear war, we have to put the United States in the best position possible to control the world afterwards. I mean, you have people who are somewhat insane who are influencing policy. And so we've got to figure out a way to walk off this ledge, because the alternative is a little bit too terrifying for me.
Sure. Well, I hope there are people inside that Trump would listen to who would express these opinions, but from the kind of circle that he's surrounded by and the kind of speech and the tone he delivered that inauguration speech, I'm not seeing that kind of cautiousness. For instance, in his inauguration speech, what stayed in my mind, for instance, was that he declared America will soon be greater, stronger, and far more exceptional than ever before. Standing ovation, applauses. America will be a nation like no other. Later in that speech, he said, full of compassion, courage, and exceptionalism. Cheers, loud cheers, applauses, standing ovation. Ina, what would the global implications of these philosophy of how to behave?
Well, in many ways, it's a continuation. I agree with the former panelist, my other panelists who said that America is an empire. We have not made the transition to a civilization. The difference between an empire, which solves its problem by taking things from other countries, and a civilization which tries to manage its internal issues, is something that's lost on Washington. I do agree with Peter that there is a third way. And China is definitely trying to deal with that, which is he's very transactional. I don't care what the people around him, they're extremely disposable. None of them are very, very qualified, so if they leave, it doesn't really matter. But he himself is interested in the Nobel Peace Prize. He wants to go down in history as this grand deal maker. So there is hope to deal with him on that side. But this kind of putting your faith in the Washington elite, I think that day has passed.
Professor Huang, it takes two to tango. What do you say?
I think that if we have learned any lessons from our previous disasters, that is, we can never appease to a person like Donald Trump, to an aggressor. Appeasement does not work. So I do believe that there is a third way between the United States and China to work together, but that will start from China has shown clearly to Donald Trump and his people and to the rest of the world. China does have this resolve and capability to defend peace, especially in the Asian Pacific. I think China has begun to show that kind of strength. Only by doing that, then, that, just like I said, you have to stand your ground firm, then you can make a deal. And to Donald Trump, he will never ever make a deal, so-called deal, with someone he thinks he can take. He thinks is weaker than him. He only makes the deals with someone he knows he cannot prevail in a confrontation. That's a starting point. So if I mean, China appears to be soft or weak in front of Donald Trump. He's only go push further and further. He's a bully. Let's keep in mind. He is a bully. So in front of bully, the only way to deal with a bully is to make sure he understands you can defend yourself. You can beat him up if he try to bully on you. That's the only way. And so that I think China should not be threatened or be scared by this. Oh, we have nuclear weapons. We can have the 3-front nuclear wars. We can destroy all of you. I mean, the one who says this word, I think this is self-weakness. It's not a self-strength. Because only when you're in a weak position, you begin to threaten others with power, with strength.
Yeah.
I think that's the weakest voice, not the strongest voice.
Margaret, what's your view on the impact of the global South, of this pronounced American exceptionalism, this naked, unabashed American exceptionalism, if I may use this word?
Well, it's very common, and Trump is like his predecessors in this way. You know, Obama used to constantly speak about America being exceptional, being the exceptional nation. So a lot of that rhetoric about America being the best, being the most exceptional, the most powerful, is very common in present, actually, unfortunately, amongst the entire population, which is very unfortunate. It makes Americans unprepared to deal with the rest of the world, and frankly keeps us all ignorant. And I think these presidents and their top people, as educated or elite as they're alleged to be, are very ignorant of the rest of the world. The global South, on the other hand, wants to be friends with China, but the U.S. wants to stop that. So Panama, for example, has a right to have relations with China, to engage China in improving their canal, but the U.S. sees that as a threat, and they're going to snatch Panama. I don't know if Trump will be able to do that, but that, unfortunately, is the situation where other countries want to have a multipolar world. They want to have good relations with the U.S. and with China and with any country they choose. But as I said before, the U.S., with this attitude of either being an enemy or a vassal, does not want to deal with other countries as equals, as sovereigns.
All right, just very quick point, Professor Huang. I give you 30 seconds, please, because President Trump accused China of operating the Panama Canal during his inauguration speech. By the way, that's the only place where he mentioned China in that speech. What's the true story here? 30 seconds, please.
That word is very hostile. By the way, if it works for China's interest, for Panama's interest, for people around Panama's interest, why not? I mean, it's a win-win situation. I think that to blame just because China is operating Panama Canal is a crime. I think that's ridiculous.
No, they're not operating it. They operate two ports on either side of the canal. The canal is separate. It's governed separately, and the fees are done by the Panamanian government, nothing to do with China.
Anyway, yeah, maybe we can do more digging there, but don't take it at face value like many of the things he says here. Anyway, thank you so much. We have to leave it there. Peter Kuznick, Margaret Kimberley, Professor Huang Jing, and Ina Tangen. Thank you so much for sharing with us your insights. Let's wait and see how the next 4 years will be. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Li Xin. As always, on behalf of the whole team, thank you for joining us. You've got the point.